What is good, y'all? Welcome back to Chris and Rock Productions. As always, I am Chris. Last night was the series finale for my favorite Star Wars show, Andor. We got the final three episodes. It was the final arc, BBY1, and it led up right into Rogue One. And I just wanted to give my overall thoughts on the season, on the show, and what I think, the importance of this show, uh, the importance of it to Star Wars. Um, so I just want to get into, some of the cast, or if I can name every single character, that I would do that, but I don't think I'll be able to. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So Andor is a show that I had extremely high expectations going into it. Reason being is because Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie. I love Empire, love New Hope and everything, but for me, Rogue One is just my favorite. And Diego Luna, tremendous actor. Uh, he's from Mexico. I'm Mexican, so I love that as well. But you know, a lot of the conversations about this show is that it's Star Wars for adults. It's Star Wars that's more matured, it's more aged, and that sentiment is, to me, at least in my estimate, is very true. Because I'm not gonna sit here and crap on other shows, because that's not what I want to do. That's not what I do on my channel. If there's something that I dislike, I'll voice it, but I'm not gonna grift and make a 30-minute video about how I hated something. I'm just not gonna spend my time like that. But I will spend my time saying how much I love this show. So let's talk about the final three episodes. We get this is gonna be spoilers, of course. We get the finale arc of Luthen. We get an extraction for Clea, and we get essentially the final hour leading up to Rogue One. That's the final three episodes overall. And what I think, episode one, or not episode one, excuse me, the first episode of the final arc, the Luthen episode with Clea, uh, Tony Gilroy, he said that after the final three episodes, a lot of people are gonna love Clea if they already don't, and he was correct. The first episode of the final three was her episode, and Luthen's, of course. And I think what it does is that it paints this picture that, as Andor has successfully done over the course of its run, that the rebellion is it's built off of hope, of course, but there's a lot of tragedy behind it. And that's obvious, of course, if you've read any of the novels or aware of any of the tragedies that we know, especially that we saw in Gorman and the episodes from last week. You know, when you go back and watch A New Hope and you see Luke and you see Han and Leia, it's so fun. It's so hopeful. It's You look at the rebellion as like this that's the light, the Empire is the dark. But Luthen is a character that he himself has gotten real dark, and that's because the Empire made him that way. And Clea, she's a victim of a genocide that Luthen, when, from my assumptions, from what I saw, he was part of it. He definitely, he has so much blood on his hands, but he's on the side of the rebellion. And when Luthen passes and Clea says her goodbye to him and stuff, it's bittersweet, of course, because you don't want Luthen to die, but you know that if you've seen any second of Andor and Luthen's character, then you know that he was going to die. There's no way he survives this show. He went out on his own terms, essentially, from Dedra. I'll get into her a little later. But let's go into the second episode, The Extraction. So Cassian and Melshi have to go and get Clea from Coruscant because she's stuck there, and she needs to deliver the news that the Death Star is a thing. and that the whole energy program that the Empire's been doing the last few years was all for the Death Star. And this is the first episode that we really get K2SO in it. Obviously, we got introduced to K2SO in this season last week, but we get an episode with him in it. Alan Tudyk, I think he's a phenomenal actor, and especially his voice acting is so hilarious. So the thing about the K2SO episode with Cassian and Melshi when they go get Clea is that it genuinely had the most comedy, and that was predictable because it's K2SO, and it's the most comedy, at least from from what I perceived, in the whole Andor series. And it was in these tense moments where Clea is being cornered by ISB. She's being cornered, and have K2SO come in and rescue them and all this other stuff. I guess I'm not gonna go into the extreme details because I'm not gonna sit here and recite the whole episode. But essentially, the extraction Diego, Cassian, Melshi, and K2, they successfully get Clea out of Coruscant, and that's the second episode of this 3-episode arc. And now they have to go and send this information over to the rebellion on Yavin. And this is where we get reintroduced to Mon and her beautiful hair. That's a big discussion online about her hair because we saw that at Rogue One. And then we get Benjamin Bratt as oh my god, I am blanking on his name. Jesus. I don't know why I'm Benjamin Bratt. Okay, Organa. Oh my god. I know obviously Jimmy Smits. I know Organa, but I kept thinking of like Galen Erso because they talked about Erso a lot. Um, there's no Galen Erso in the last episode or the last few episodes. I was fine with. I kind of wanted to see if they'd show him on like as a quick cameo, even though cameos aren't needed in this show. He fits into the story, but they didn't have him, which totally cool with that. But going into the final episode, essentially, it's just like I mentioned, the final hours leading up to Rogue One. We see Cassian try to convince the council basically that there's a Death Star being created, that Luthen got this information, and they're basically disparaging his name, saying that he was a crook and that he was basically on the outskirts of the rebellion, even though there is no rebellion without Luthen. In their eyes, they didn't see it that way. But I love that Cassian definitely, of course, he steps up and he defends Luthen's name and puts some respect on it. And I love that. That was my favorite part. One of my favorite parts of the finale is that, Cassian, through all of the hell that him and Luthen went through together, he's not gonna have people who haven't even done an ounce of what he's done for the rebellion disparage his name. And then we sort of get not I wouldn't even want to say our final goodbyes because a lot of these characters don't die besides Cassian in Rogue One and Melshi and K2. I think we see Will. He's with his girlfriend from Gorman. I've her name. I'm blanking on her name. We see Vel. We see with eating with her cousin Mon. Bell is going. Well, he hasn't left Alderaan yet, but we'll see how we know how that happens watching New Hope. And we see Cassian suit up. He's on his final mission, and it just leads right into Rogue One. And the biggest beautiful bittersweet moment of this show is that Bix, of course, that she left the last week, and she has a baby. She has Cassian's baby, and Cassian never knew. Another thing that the show didn't do was give us an answer on who his sister was, but I read Tony Gilroy, his quotes on it, and essentially he said he didn't want the sister's mystery to be solved because it builds Cassian as a character, and I totally understand that. Um, and after I just went a quick rundown of the finale, I think the importance of this show is that what am I trying to say? I love Mando season 1, season 2. The rescue episode with Skywalker with Luke, I cried like a baby. I was in tears the whole time. And then, season 3, I enjoy overall, but it's not as strong as, season 1 or season 2. Ahsoka has its moments. Obi-Wan has its moments, especially with Vader. But I think Andor is, besides season 1, season 2 of Mando, I'm not gonna disrespect those seasons. If this feels the most Star Wars to me, it feels like you had George look at the world, look at the history of what's being created around him, and he's gonna have that reflect in his stories, as opposed to the newer shows that we've gotten recently, where this is gonna sound very disparaging. It's gonna sound like I'm crapping on them, and I'm not. I promise you, I'm not. But they're kind of like fan fiction, not fan fiction. Oh, excuse me. They're like fan shows. I don't know. They're just because they feel like we're gonna take all these elements of Star Wars and put it into a show, and you're gonna love all the cameos and the lightsabers and everything. But Andor feels like we're gonna take a look at the world and we're gonna reflect that into our show. So I think this, no notes, 10 out of 10. Something I think season 2 improved on compared to season 1 is that there was more alien species that we didn't see that much in season 1. And that's like the only thing I could think that's different. Diego Luna, it's funny. Yesterday was the finale of his character, of his show. And it was also the 10th anniversary to the day of when he was officially casted as a Cassian. So I think that was pretty neat. But I think this show's perfect. It's a 10 out of 10. I think it delivers everything that it promises. And I watched Rogue One. I watched it this morning. Last night I couldn't. I had to go to sleep. It was already getting late in the night. But I watched Rogue One this morning, and it's like during my. It was just like a very different movie. And Tony Gilroy is correct. He said you're gonna look at Rogue One as a very different movie, and you do, because you know so much more context of these characters. And then the final shot of Cassian hugging Jin, um, it just hits even more. So, yeah, guys, that is my overall thoughts on the finale of Andor as a series. Go check that out. And yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. As always, I'm Chris. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.